Then on Sports Central, we go for our next team prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Kansas State Wildcats, a team that went 10-4 overall in the 2022 season. This team broke through in the 2022 season, won the Big 12 and made it to the New Year's Six. Just an outstanding season for K-State, and this team is definitely on the rise as we look forward to 2023. How will this team be in 2023, and whether or not this team could be a contender once again in the 2023 season is what we'll be talking about here today. We'll be analyzing this team and predict their schedule game by game in this video. Let's get started with a quick recap of 2022. This team was outstanding last season, 10-4 being the final record. I think we all kind of knew K-State was going to be good last season, but I don't think too many expected this team to go out and just outright win the Big 12. And so just an outstanding year for this team, winning the conference, making it to the Sugar Bowl to take on Alabama. Just a great season for this team. And yeah, K-State is definitely headed in the right direction. And really from the start, the first two games, dominant wins over South Dakota and Missouri. Turns out Missouri was not a bad team last season, and this team beat them 40-12. But then the next week was a very concerning loss. Lost to Tulane 17-10. By the way, at the time, Tulane, K-State fans know this, but Tulane at the time was not considered a good football team at all. They were coming off of a just horrible 2021 season. And so for Tulane to go into Manhattan, beat K-State, was a really impressive win for Tulane, and K-State just looked horrible, only scoring 10 points in that game. But turns out, the wild thing is both teams, between K-State and Tulane, even K-State didn't have very high expectations heading into that matchup, but both teams would eventually be in the New Year's Six. Tulane would win a New Year's Six game over USC. Just insane to think about where both Tulane and Kansas State ended up. And the next week took on Oklahoma on the road, which the Sooners at that point in the season were considered a big national contender. So for K-State to go in there, get the win 41-34, what a game that was. Going into Norman, a tough place to play, taking on the Sooners. In Oklahoma, it's same storyline for them, except in the opposite direction. They just, their perspective only got worse after that. They were really not considered a national contender from that point forward. And then took on Texas Tech, got the win there 37-28, beat Iowa State 10-9, had the bye week, came off of the bye week to take on TCU, which TCU to end up in the national championship, that TCU team is one of the greatest surprise teams of all time. There were a lot of people and fans that were saying, TCU might struggle to even get to 6 wins, and turns out they went to the national championship. Just wild. But lost to them by 10, beat Oklahoma State, though, the next week 48-0, and then lost to Texas 34-27. So a couple of close losses down the stretch. Beat Baylor on the road 31-3, beat West Virginia 48-31, and then beat Kansas 47-27. Went to the Big 12 championship, took on TCU, which TCU heading into that matchup was a perfect 12-0. They were undefeated through the regular season, and he knocked off TCU 31-28, an outstanding win in overtime there. And that's how K-State got to the Sugar Bowl, and they lost Alabama 45-20 in the Sugar Bowl. Alabama was just too much in the end. But for this team last season, to see how far they got to the Sugar Bowl and took on Alabama. Just an incredible year for K-State, and definitely a step in the right direction. And that's so. Let's take a look at 2023 now. Your roster preview heading into the season. The quarterback situation is going to be slightly different, but Will Howard is coming back, which is great news. He's definitely a different quarterback than Adrian Martinez. Adrian Martinez is absolutely a big dual threat quarterback, while Will Howard is very much different from that. Adrian Martinez last season, when he played, threw nearly 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns, just an interception, but he had over 600 rushing yards on the year and 10 touchdowns. Adrian Martinez, when he played, he was excellent for this team, especially once he got going. I still remember the Oklahoma matchup when he just went. He was dominant over that Oklahoma defense. But yeah, it's going to be great to have Will Howard back, even though Adrian Martinez is gone. The backfield does lose Deuce Vaughn. That is a slight concern there, considering, last season Deuce Vaughn put up nearly 2,000 yards of offense and 12 touchdowns. So you do lose him, but you do have DJ Giddens coming back, which is definitely a good sign. At least he got someone coming back from that backfield. And in the receiving corps, Malik Nowels is gone. Cade Warner's also gone. So your top and your third wideouts are both gone, but at least you got your second wideout in Phillip Brooks, and then your top tight end in Ben Sinnott. both coming back. You lose 2 on the offensive line, 2 on the defensive line, 1 linebacker, and then 5 in the secondary. So you do lose 5 in the secondary. That will be significant. The defensive secondary might be a bit inexperienced this season, but otherwise there is a lot of potential all around. I mean, losing Deuce Vaughn is a bit concerning. I mean, he put up nearly 2,000 yards last season, so you're going to have to replace him. And DJ Giddens, I do think, can do that, but I just don't think he'll be on the same level as Deuce Vaughn has been. But overall, this team has still got some good depth, and it brings up the question, does this team remain a contender in 2023? Could this team win the Big 12 again this upcoming season? I mean, I'm just going to say this. The Big 12 is wide open as we look forward to 2023. It could honestly be 4, 5, 6 teams that could win the Big 12 this season. Kansas State is definitely one of them. They're definitely one of my favorites. Honestly, I mean, I'm kind of leaning towards Texas probably for my favorite in the Big 12, but even Texas, they just find a way to choke every year. So, I mean, Kansas State, I really think this team is up there. Wouldn't be surprised one bit if this team was at least competing for the Big 12 title next season. But looking at your transfer portal and recruiting now, really this team hasn't been too active in the transfer portal. Treshaun Ward, this is significant. He's coming in from Florida State. So at least you do have him. You have Giddens coming back, but you also got Treshaun Ward, which you can expect him to probably be the top running back on this team now that I see it here. So the backfield does have him. That is going to be definitely a huge addition there. Keep an eye on him. You also got Keegan Johnson coming in from Iowa. He was a top receiver on Iowa last season. And so if he can get even better, and I do think he will, because, I mean, he was dealing with Spencer Petras at Iowa. So having Will Howard is going to be much better than his situation at Iowa. So that's going to be a huge addition there as well. Javon Banks, defensive lineman, is coming in from Mississippi State. You lose Crew Jackson and Gavin Forshaw at different places. You bring in Marquez Siegel, defensive back from North Dakota State. You lose Omar Daniels and TJ Smith to different places as well. So, I mean, defensively, there's a few, I mean, especially the defensive secondary I'm pretty concerned about. But otherwise, there's still a lot of potential on this team, especially on offense. Now with Treshaun Ward, I forgot about him. I mean, yeah, Treshaun Ward coming in is going to be huge from Florida State. So I think the backfield, yeah, generally looks good. The receiving core, Keegan Johnson coming in is big as well. Will Howard. This offense honestly should be pretty good. Wouldn't be concerned about them. It's just the defense, quite honestly, for K-State. But recruiting-wise, pretty good. 32nd in the country, 5th in the Big 12. You got 3 4-stars coming in, and then 23 3-stars. And so future's bright for K-State. I really like where this team is at right now. I've got them at an 8 out of 10 on the future forecast meter. That's basically saying there's an 80% chance of a bright future for K-State. Wouldn't be surprised if this team was a contender once again in 2023 and into the future as well. But that said, let's take a look at your 2023 schedule now. So you got Southeast Missouri at home in week 1 and then Troy at home in week 2. First 2 games at home, very winnable to start the season. And then you got Missouri on the road. Now, Missouri is a team that I think you should be keeping an eye on. That's a team that I don't see being a big contender in the SEC. It's just too brutal of a conference for Missouri to be a contender. But I do think Missouri could be in that 6 to 8 win range next season. I could see them being pretty good. So keep an eye on Missouri. That is definitely not going to be an easy game there on the road. And then UCF at home to start the conference slate. UCF in the Big 12 this season. And then Oklahoma State on the road, Texas Tech on the road, TCU at home, and then Houston also at home, Texas on the road to start November. And then Baylor at home, Kansas on the road, and then Iowa State at home to finish out the regular season. So obviously your 4 new teams in the Big 12 this upcoming season. Houston and UCF are the 2 teams you'll be facing. You don't have to play Cincinnati or BYU in 2023. But looking at the first 4 matchups, once again, first 2 games very winnable. You should take care of Southeast Missouri and then Troy, no problems. You're 2-0 to start out the season, and then Missouri on the road. This was a game that I originally had Kansas State winning it, but I had to go with Missouri after thinking about it a bit. It's a road game. 2 old rivals from a few years ago before Missouri moved out to the SEC. I think Missouri next season, I mean, they were actually pretty good in 2022 for their standards, got up to 6-6, really improved over the course of 2022 as well. I mean, in the SEC being a tough conference like it is, a 6-6 Missouri team could be like an 8-4, even 9-3 team in, say, the ACC. So, but Missouri, I do think that's going to be a decent team, a road game. I do think Missouri steals one from you there. but it's definitely a close matchup that could definitely go either way. And then UCF at home after that. UCF is a team to keep an eye on. If any of the 4 teams, the new 4 teams coming into the Big 12, are going to be a contender, it's probably going to be UCF. I don't think any of the 4 teams end up being a contender, but UCF, I do like them a decent amount. BYU could be decent. Canon Slovis, I think Houston falls off a bit. Same with Cincinnati. So UCF, a tough opponent, but I think you get the win there. So you're 3-1 heading into October. You got Oklahoma State on the road. I think you beat them. Oklahoma State at that point in the season, I mean, they're going to be kind of in an interesting spot, a bit of an experience for the Cowboys this upcoming season. And then Texas Tech on the road. This is also a winnable matchup. Texas Tech was pretty good last year, ended up being a solid 8-win team. And so I do think this is one to keep an eye on. I do think Texas Tech is going to be a solid team this upcoming season. I'm going to take them, Tyler Shuck. I like them to get the win there, even though it's a very winnable game once again. Then TCU at home, I do think TCU falls off a bit. I don't like them quite as much, and you also got them at home. So I think you beat TCU. So that puts you at 5-2 heading into the Houston matchup, and you beat Houston no problem. Once again, I really don't have too high of expectations for Houston this upcoming season. So you're 6-2 heading into November, and the last 4 games are all games that could be close, and I do think you win all 4 here. So Texas on the road, I do think Texas is going to be one of the top teams in the Big 12. They might be my favorite to win the conference, and I've got you guys beating Texas on the road against a team in Texas that I've got projected for 10 or 11 wins in 2023. So you're going to be one of Texas's only losses this upcoming season. I think this team could be red hot heading into the final weeks of the regular season. You got Baylor, easy win there. Really don't expect them to be a big contender. You beat Kansas on the road, even though a closer matchup there. I think Kansas hangs in there, maybe makes it a close game, but I'm taking the Wildcats there for sure. I mean, for Kansas, that's a team that has just had no success at all. And so for last season, for them to get to a bowl game, it was like the Super Bowl for them. I mean, that's a team that just never has any success in football. So I can still see them being decent, though, in 2023. I mean, for their standards, 4 to 5 wins is pretty good. So that's where I've got them at. And so I do think a close game, but you get the win. And then Iowa State, take care of them, no problem. So you're 10-2 next season. Another 10-win season here for K-State. I do think this team takes a loss or 2 throughout the season. It's just a matter of who that's going to be to. I've got it against Missouri and Texas Tech. Maybe not the 2 best teams on your schedule, but both on the road, and I'd say dangerous games against teams that could be pretty good. So I do have a couple of losses. I think, honestly, the Big 12, you're going to have 4 teams at the top. It's going to be kind of similar to last season where who knows who's the best team in the conference. But there's a good chance I've got 4 or 5 teams in the Big 12 at 10-2 for their records this season. I think it's going to be a very top-heavy conference once again. But looking at your range, I think the range for K-State is also pretty wide. I think 12-0 is my ceiling for this team. It's pretty unlikely this team goes undefeated, and it's pretty unlikely this team goes 7-5, but that is the ceiling and the floor for this team this upcoming season. Honestly, if there's a good ballpark where this team will be, I'd say 9-11 wins. I've got this team at 10-2 right in the middle. Once again, I think this team does take a loss or 2. I mean, the defense, I just don't know if the defense will be able to handle a couple games, and I do think at some point this team will take a loss or 2, but still a great season coming up here. I really like this team, and I think this is a team that is definitely heading in the right direction. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on K-State, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.